carry further. So
This
that is
call is now
something which
being recorded.
where it you make it believe. So in this one, since there we people are saying that the aim is to make the reader accept the author view is correct. So where is the attempt where we are going to argue that if we are already saying yes? So argument is something where we have a kind of a critical thinking, where we are not we hold a kind of a different perception what authors is saying, what an author is saying. So there is a different point of view. But see, whenever we are making a kind of an argument, make sure that means that if we are saying, if someone has to argue, so he or she has to give the reasons in order to support the statement, either against it. So you should have the valid reasons that how we are going to have that kind of an argument. So whenever we are saying this kind of a thing, so argument is something which is basically based on a logic, that is logical based. Second, it can be considered as it is a science of reasoning. And in an argument, whenever we are having an argument, one has to offer a kind of a reason in order to support it, or any kind of an opinion in order to whether we are against that argument. So that is something which is being expressed in a form of a statement. So that is something when we compose it in a form of a writing. So that is considered as an argumentative composition. Okay, so that is what that means, where we are trying to convince someone. That means we are trying to convince the reader of a particular point. We are not satisfied with that point. So definitely we will argue. One is the persuasive, where we totally believe, yes, this is right. But when we took a kind of a stand that no, this is not where we actually come up on a common norm. So that is something which can be considered as an argumentative kind of a composition. I will give you the examples also. So we are with an example, you will be able to understand it. So that is here. This is how we can differentiate that what is a kind of a persuasive composition and what is there in an argumentative composition and how they differentiate. So persuasive is something that means which can be considered as a power to influence the reader in believing or doing whatever the writer wishes. Like sometimes what happens, it in modern times, like when we used to hear the stories, so the stories are they goes on with certain kind of a narration, and we believe in those stories or any kind of a fable, isn't it? But where we are saying that where we have a kind of a logical thinking or a logical mind. So what will happen? Definitely we will not satisfy with that saying, and definitely we will go for an argument. So that is something which can be considered as that means where the attempt to convince the reader that author idea is true. Okay, like I can give you an example. Like before we came to this kind of a theory, people used to believe that Earth is flat. And now in this context, if I say that Earth is flat, everyone will say, no, it's not flat. It's not at all flat. Okay, so it is in a different kind of a shape. It is in a shape of our Earth is something which is known as a blue planet, and it is not, it's oval. So that is how we people are saying. That is earlier, if someone said that, no, we can just say that Earth is flat. So that is something where is you believe in the writer saying. And where we say that no, it's not like that. It's something which is being separated by so many kind of a things. So that is where we are rational, we are logical, and we have a kind of a valid proof. Okay, we have a kind of a theory, that means a scientific reason how we can say that Earth is not flat. It is something which is oval in shape. It's different. So that is how it comes to a kind of an argument. So here, in a persuasive kind of a composition, there are attempts to persuade the reader to agree with the author's idea. So here what we do, we agree whatever the author is trying to say. But in an argumentative composition, it is used to defend or prove a point. So that is something which is being noted over there. We used to defend it because we want to prove it. Here, in a persuasive kind of a composition, the author uses his own ideas, opinion in order to convince the reader. So, author has its own thought. It has its own thought system. Whereas in an argumentative composition, what we talk about that the writer should do the research. He has to produce certain kind of the accurate facts and figures before writing an argumentative kind of a statement. So that is something which is being required over there. Then the next difference between a persuasive composition, that here, in a persuasive composition, we do not acknowledge that whether whatever he is saying is right or wrong, because we do not have any kind of an opposite views. We do not hold any kind of an opposite views against anyone. But in an argumentative composition, we acknowledge the opposing views. We always have a different idea. Okay, we always think out of the box. We have, because we do not believe what that person is trying to say. So that is why we are going to be rational, and then only we are going to give our own statement. Now, when we are talking about the persuasive, so that is here, in a persuasive, there is no any kind of a research is required. So there is nothing which they need. But whenever we are talking about an argumentative kind of a composition, we need to do a kind of a research before stating our point. So that is something which we can say before forming any kind of an argumentative sentence or any kind of an argumentative composition. The writer should convince you with a fact, and that is something which can be considered as a logic. Sometimes, if they do not, the main composition, whenever we are saying that argumentative, whether it is an argumentative lecture or not, sometimes what happens, there is a kind of a controversial topic which is actually given for a discussion. So that is where we people can say that yes, there is an argumentative kind of a composition. If you will just go through your textbook which is being given, and FEG2 unit, FEG2 unit number 2, and in page number 7, they have given a kind of an example. And that example is something which says that women have a right to equal opportunities in public life and worthwhile careers. They must have given improved training, facilities in every field, equal access to the profession, to universities, and to the course enabling to promote in their chosen careers must be genuine and meaningful. So here, what does it mean? It means that it is very assertive kind of a statement where the, just give me 1 minute. Okay. So here, um, these are the techniques which can be considered for an argument. So these are the techniques. So whenever we people are talking about what are the techniques of an argument, the techniques of the argument are, it can be an assertive argument, it can be argument by illustration, it can be factual argument, or it can be a kind of a refutation or a counter argument. So these are the techniques which are being used. That means there are various factors, there are various tactics which writers employ in order to persuade the reader to accept their point of view. So they have different kind of the techniques. So first of all, when we people are talking about what an assertive argument is, so this can be considered as one of the technique of an argument which is marked by a forceful statement or a claim. So it can be considered in a form of a claim. So that is something which can be considered as, that means here there is a kind of an assertive statement, and the writer, what he does, he gives a general reason in support of his or her position. And then what we are saying, we can say that yes, the reader have to uh, accept, and it can depend on their own experience, because this is where we have seen that he expresses the opinion and belief, and he is very confident and self-assured manner without resorting to the aggression or confrontation. And on the other hand, what the author does, that the author can say that he can give certain kind of the general reasons in support of his or her claims. So that is how we people can talk about the assertive form of an argument. And whenever we are saying about the assertive way, so it is always marked by the forceful statement. For example, as I told you, that where we can say that women have a right to equal opportunity in public life and worthwhile careers. So that is a very wonderful kind of a statement, that we cannot say that women are someone who are indulge only in a kind of a homely activities. They are not someone who are there for a domestic work. We should give women a kind of an equal opportunity where they can explore the spheres of the public life. Okay, that means where they can look after their private life also, as well as they can just go and pursue their careers. We cannot force them that no, you just have to lead a kind of a domestic life. On the other hand, this is what the other statement says in the example, that they must be given an improved training facilities in a field equal to access to the profession. So there should be a kind of a profession for a woman, and they should be given a kind of a facility so that they could go and they can pursue their career. And that is what is how they will get those kind of a training. So that training can be anything, that can be through universities or any kind of a course which enable them to obtain a kind of a higher qualification. Until or unless you are not able to educate a woman, women needs an education, and once she gets an education, definitely she can explore worldwide. So that is the importance of an education, and that is where we can say that the women can also explore the different kind of the platforms in any kind of a career. Like suppose if I say that first of all, when we people used to believe that, oh, um, it's not a very masochist kind of a thing, where we people used to say, yeah, the astronaut. So astronaut, the first astronaut. So the first thing which will come in our mind will be Neil Armstrong. Okay. And then this image was something which was being broken up by the females. So that astronaut is not something which will be representing only a male gender. Then when we are talking about the Kalpana Chawla or any other one, so what we have seen that no, the astronauts, so that means the females. So this cannot be considered as someone which will just go to a male. So until or unless the females are not given a kind of an opportunity, so they cannot lead. So that is how these examples also say. And then the opportunity of winning promotion in their chosen career must be genuine and meaningful. This is something which is a very assertive kind of an argument where people will say, yes, whatever, there will be no counterpart. So it is a very general kind of a statement which is very factual, and that is how this is up to you how you are going to access it, how you are going to understand it. It is already given in your textbook, so you just have to follow it up. And on the other hand, there is another kind of that is another kind of a technique of argument, and that is argument by illustration. So wherever we are talking about the illustration, illustrations means the examples. Suppose in order to justify any kind of a statement, like if I was saying that yes, the earth is not flat, the earth is round. So how we are going to justify this kind of a statement? That different kind of a time zone, and there are the kind of the circles which we have seen that some places we have the night, some places we have the day. So this is how we people can say that actually the earth is not flat. So later on with the improvement of the technology, so there we are giving the examples or illustration to uh, define ourselves. So that is something which can be considered as an argument, but that argument is something which is through an illustration. So that is how we people have seen. So there is another example which is being given in your book, and that is again which has been given in page number 7 of your book. The example is something that is where he's saying that the passage says that the writer uses an example to support his statement that a middle class Chinese housewife in Singapore does not do much work as an American woman. So, how he is going to justify? There is a kind of a comparison between a Chinese woman and a Chinese housewife, and a comparison of the American women. So that is where they will give you a kind of an example, and this is something which is being taken from Missioner. And this example says that in Singapore, recently I had an opportunity to see a middle class Chinese wife lived. So he is just starting his statement with a kind of a statement where he's saying that he got a kind of a chance to visit Singapore, and he went and he met a kind of a lady, and she belonged to a middle class family, and that was the Chinese. And Mr. Chang Eng husband enjoyed in an income marked less than average in a buck country, but her day ran something like this: rise at 10, dress in clothes laid out by personal maid, inspect the children who were being cared for by an ama, check the day's meal, which would be prepared by the cook and served by the maid, drive to the daily mahjong game in car handled only to the chauffeur, and in the late afternoon return home to rest and dress for her own dinner party, where she will be the hostess, but for which she has not done a single bit of preparatory work. So this is how this kind of a sentence he is uh, they are talking about. So that is where he's talking about the middle class Chinese wife, and where they are living and what they are doing. They are someone who are being supported. They are being supported by a kind of a personal maid, and their task is just to inspect the children and who were being taken care. Apart from that, she just have to keep a check on what things are being cooked or not, whether they are being served properly by a maid or not. And on the other hand, her job is to go somewhere, buy the groceries, something like that, and finally she will come back and she will have a kind of a dinner, but that dinner is something which is not being prepared by her, but that is a kind of a dinner which is being prepared by the maid only. So what does it? The statement says that even though she is a housewife, but there she has a kind of a help. Okay, so this is where, and but on the other hand, how the working class women, or where we people are talking about in America, we do not get any kind of a house help. So how these people are going to live their life and how they handle the workplace as well as their own house. So that is where we people can see that all the activities of that Chinese housewife will appear to be screened in front of your eyes. So whatever she is doing, that is something which is coming right in front of your eyes, and that is how we can understand these kind of the statement. Always remember that whenever we are whenever we are writing these kind of a composition, so composition can be something where we mark it with a full stop or a semicolon. So punctuation also plays a very important kind of a role. So with the help of a punctuation, what we do, we take a pause, we reread it. So that is how it becomes very important. So these are few examples which are already being given in the course material which is being provided to you. Apart from that, in my slides, I'm talking about what all things, how these are to be stated and how these things are to be studied. Next is the technique of an argument, that is the factual argument. So factual, as we just look towards the term only. So what does it mean? It is something which is being based on a fact. The epistemology is something which is something where we people are saying that indisputable way of arguing. So that means indisputable. There is no dispute if we are making this kind of a composition. So there will be not any kind of a dispute, because whatever we people are presenting, for each and every presentation, we have a kind of a fact. And or what we people can say, we can say that we have a kind of an evidence. So that is something which leads towards a factual kind of an argument. So where we are saying that what are facts? So facts can be considered as uh, that the things that have actual existence or event that actually happened. So that kind of a conversation is something, or that kind of a composition is something which can be considered as a factual argument. So it is always based on numbers. Okay, because we have to say, and or it can includes a kind of a table, or it can like when we are doing some kind of a experiments in chemistry, we make sure that whatever readings are coming, or any kind of an experiment in physics, so the reading should be accurate, the chemical content should be accurate. So all these things are something which are being used in a factual kind of an argument. So here there is something where we people can say that there is a kind of an example, and the example is something which is being given in your uh, the book only, the block only. So this is where they say that at the last count, there were only 466 local authority nurseries caring for 25,574 children in all, and this at a time when Britain has nearly 9 million working women, representing close on 40% of the country's total workforce. Okay, so here they are making a kind of a comparison. That means how many local authorities and how many caring nurseries were there to take care of the children. So it can be considered any kind of um, where we can send our children, where we can keep our children. where the working women can keep their children. So that is something where they are saying that the 40% of the women are someone who are working and they are trying to produce it with a kind of a fact. And we have these type of the caretakers. So that is something which can be considered as a factual argument. Then the another form of an argument is refutation or a counter argument. So refutation or counter argument is something where we have to disapprove. Refute means we refuse it. We do not claim. We do not accept. It means that we disapprove or we disapprove to the answer of any other person. Okay, so that is where we are not ready for the kind of the statement which that person is saying. So here, when we refuse for something, so it it produces a kind of refutation is one purpose of an argument, and it can show that there is a kind of a weakness in other person's logic or argument. And wherever we are refusing, so we have to give a counter argument why we are refusing on this kind of a statement. So for that, we have to give a kind of a counter statement. So that is something which becomes very important, and that is what we people have seen. So here, like for example, I give you that when we are saying there is a kind of an example which is being given. So that is married women have as much right to take part in general activities of a community as other people. They are just as likely to do good work, and many of them do not feel satisfied solely by the household and the family duty. So this is a kind of an example which they are saying that if a woman, and woman is also married, she can take part in any kind of an activity. Okay, and whether she is very good in her own work, so she can explore. And if she doesn't if she is not satisfied in those kind of the household or a family duty, she can just explore something else. So what does it mean? It means that what the fact which is against it is that she a married woman is not supposed to remain within the premises of her household. If she want to explore her own talent, it is not something where she just have to constrain herself till the home. She can explore herself. She can explore her talent outside also. So that is which can be considered as an against, because if we just look towards this example, it is just trying to focus that she should just within the premises of her household, she should just do the kind of a work which is there in her house, and her first duty is to take care of her family. So it's not necessary. Yes, family is also there, but it depends that how whether we want to continue with this kind of an argument or not, whether we accept it or not. So that is there. So these are certain kind of the examples which are being given, and apart from that, uh, these are certain kind of the techniques in the argument. So till now, what we people have done, we have discussed the assertive, we have discussed about the argument by illustrations, we have discussed about the factual argument, and as well as we have discussed about the refutation or a counter argument. So these all things are the one which we people have already discussed. So now we will be talking about how we are going to compose an argument, because we might get certain kind of the examples, but how we are going to compose any kind of an argument. So here Like suppose if I give you a kind of an example, so the example can be anything. Like suppose uh, okay, first of all, what we are going to talk about, we are going to talk about composing an argument. So how we are going to compose an argument. So to compose an argument, so if I suppose say, whenever we are composing a kind of an argument, first of all, we have to decide that on what we people are arguing, and we have to limit ourselves to what possible within the time and space. So that is something which is being available to us. So that doesn't mean that if we are not um, if we have a kind of an argument, if we are not satisfied, and if we have to give a kind of a counter argument, so we should not exceed the word limit. We should be factual, we should be systematic, and we should be precise. So that is something, first of all, the first component is number one, we choose a topic. Second, we take a position. Third is something where we gather all the kind of the information which can be, which deals with the facts, which deals with the data, and finally we present that kind of an argument logically, and we can provide the counter argument, and finally what we people can do, we people can give a kind of a conclusion. Like see if we people have seen in example number one. So example number one, we people have seen that if the women, that means it was something which was talking about the equality of the women only. If that was an assertive kind of a statement, where we people are we're talking about that if the women are given certain kind of the equal opportunity for higher education and promotion, so then only they can explore, then only they can go further. On the other hand, the second example which we people have gone through, the Chinese women. So this is what is being expected out of a Chinese lady, that a housewife, that she should wake up at time, she should get dressed all the whole day, she should inspect the children, she has to keep a kind of a check on the meal, she has to drive, and she's supposed to take a kind of a rest in the afternoon, and finally in the end, she can just go and dress for the dinner party. So this is how we can explain her life. So that is these are the examples which we people have seen. So for example, if I say that there is a kind of a statement, uh, how many of you will agree with this kind of a statement, like where we train our mind? Like reading is something which is very important for our mind. Reading is something which can be considered as an exercise of mind. In the similar manner, if we take a walk or if we play, it can be considered as an exercise for our body. So, what is this statement all about? How can we say that? What is it all about? Reading is a kind of an exercise for our mind, and sports is a kind of an exercise for our body. So, is what kind of a composition is this? Can it be assertive? Can it be counter questioned? Can it be persuasive? Any response? No response? Okay, I will repeat my question when I'm going to deal with the question and answer session. Am I audible? Yes or no? Is it a yes or a no?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Otherwise, I was thinking that I'm teaching a blank, I'm teaching some kind of the objects which are lying right in front of me. So finally, I'm there with the human beings. So now we are coming towards the unit 8, and unit 8 is something which talks about the same. We are going to extend this statement, the argumentative composition, but here what we people are going to deal, we are going to discuss about the inductive and the deductive methods of writing, as well as what are the rational and non-rational modes of writing an argument, and we are going to discuss uh, it with certain kind of the examples. So this is what we have seen, that there is a kind of a difference between informing someone or communicating something to someone and convincing someone to accept your point of view. So in order to convince other person, one should always follow a logical sequence of thought, and only we will be able to convince. Now what we are going to talk about in this unit, which is given in your book, and that is the argumentative composition, that is unit number 8. So here we are going to talk about the logic and how we people can say that what is the methodology to how we are going to use it in a form of a writing. That means if we have to write any kind of a composition in form of an argument, how we are going to write it. Till now we have gone through the examples where we have seen different kind of the argumentative composition. Now here we are going to talk about how we can include in it in a writing methodology. So that is something which we are going to discuss. So here there are two forms of reasoning. So where we people are saying that what a logic is. So logic is always defined as a science of reasoning. Whenever we are talking about a logical argument, we imply the ordering of the ideas that determines the proper outcome. So that is something which is being required. That means it has an outcome. So for that, they had given a kind of an example, and the example is something that means each of the things brought from the super bazaar is cheaper than what we get at other places. So we can therefore say most of the time the super bazaars are cheaper than elsewhere. So they are talking about the supermarket, and they feel that um, supermarket, if we go and purchase any kind of a thing in a supermarket, things are more cheaper as compared to the other shop. So this is a very general kind of a statement. So, but here what we have seen that there is a kind of a form. That means there is a kind of a support of a general statement. So there, this is how it is being supported, and how it is being supported. That means either on one hand, it gives you a kind of an example, that is an inductive method, and on the other hand, that can be a deductive method. So deductive reasoning is something which can be considered that we move from the general to a particular. So like I was giving you the example of the super bazaar, and in that super bazaar, what we people have seen that the things are something which are cheaper. That means if we just go and visit in that kind of a market, and if we compare it with the other products, it will be much more easy, and it will be much more cheaper. So that is something which is a general kind of a statement. And that is something which is being called as an inductive reasoning, where the argument proceeds from the particular to a general. On the other hand, there is another kind of an example which says that super bazaar items are cheaper than the same items elsewhere. I brought this tea from at the super bazaar, therefore it must be cheaper than the tea of the same quality of other shop. So now what they are doing, this is something which can be considered as, on one hand, there was a kind of a statement which was just saying, it was a very general kind of a statement that things are cheaper over there. So that makes us believe that if we go to a kind of a supermarket and if we purchase any kind of a thing, as compared to the other market, the things, the groceries, or any kind of an item which we purchase from a supermarket would be much more cheaper than any other else. So that is a kind of an argument which proceeds from a particular to a general. So that is something which can be considered as a general kind of a statement. Whereas deductive is something we are putting a kind of a general idea to a particular idea. So in the next example, what the writer is trying to say, in the next example, the writer is saying that yes, actually he went to a supermarket, and from there, what he has done, he has purchased a kind of a tea, a packet of a tea, and this is what is being expected after purchasing it. He believes that the packet of the tea is something which will be much more cheaper than the any other product. So that is how he is coming up with this kind of a fact. So here, this example shows that Super Bazaar, the example again I'm saying that Super Bazaar's items are cheaper than the same items elsewhere. I bought this tea from the Super Bazaar, therefore it must be cheaper than the tea at the same quality at other shop. So this is where we can say that we have a kind of a deductive reasoning, that is we move from the general to a particular. So now the idea is something which is being shifted from the general idea to a set of a fact to a particular idea. So this is how we can say that shifting from one point to the other point. So that is something which can be considered as the inductive mode of an argument and the deductive mode of an argument. So that was the example which was being given. On the other hand, there is another example which is being given in your textbook, and that is you have to identify whether that passage which is being given, and that is something which is being given in your page number 14 of your textbook. So it shows that there is a kind of an exercise, and that exercise says that read the following message and say whether the reasoning is inductive or deductive. So that is where these people are talking about that read the following passage and say whether the reasoning is inductive or deductive. So you have to find out the topic sentence for each of the following passage. So here the passage goes like this. If you are just going to read it, you will find it that here they are going to say the topic is something, the facilities at this club are not satisfactory. In the park, the children's swing are not properly hung and they are not high enough, with the result that children skin their knees when they try to swing. The basketball field is too small for the use of teenager. The card tables and the ping pong tables are not of the standard size. So this is a kind of an example. This is a kind of an exercise which is being given in your textbook. And from this textbook, they just wanted to, you have to identify that what kind of a statement it is. As I told you, as you can see in your slide, it is already being mentioned that this kind of a statement is something That means inductive is a generalization from a particular to a general. And deductive is something which is general to a particular. So again, now if we are going to look toward this passage which is being given in your exercise, so it says that the facilities at this club is not satisfactory. So the club facilities. So this is where they are saying that this is a general idea, a general form of a statement. And what they are doing in the park children swing. Number one, they are talking about the swings of the children. They're not properly hung. One complaint. Second, they are not high enough. The swings are not high enough, and that which results into a kind of the problem in their skins, the problem in their knees when they try to swing. The second is again they're moving towards the particular idea. The particular idea is something where they are talking about the basketball field. So again, the example, again they are shifting. First was the swing, and then the particular was again the another example, the basketball. So what they are saying, even the basketball field is very very small, not for the use of the teenager. And then the third statement is something where they are talking about the card tables on the ping pong tables which are not of the standard size. So that means the argument is something which is being proceeding from a general to a particular. So the example for this one, so if someone will ask you if this paragraph is being given or if this kind of a composition is being given and they're going to ask you that what kind of a composition is this, definitely the answer will be it is a deductive kind. Okay, so if you have to identify, so just quote that from general to a specific idea, to a particular idea. So it goes to a particular statement. One particularity is the swing, second particularity is the basketball field, and the third particularity is the card tables and the ping pong tables. So this is how they are giving you an example. Now, when we just shift to the other passage, that is, again, they have given a kind of an example, and that is passage number two. And passage number two, I'm just reading this passage from the book, and this is how you have to identify that what kind of a passage this is, whether is it an inductive kind of a passage or a deductive kind of a passage. So some exercises I will be doing with you, rest of the exercises you have to do all by yourself. So you have to make sure that whatever you are going to deal, you have to, until or unless you are not practicing it at home, all the lectures are not worthwhile. The thing is, whatever is being taught, because we have a very limited kind of a time period, and in that limited time period, we are dealing with your exercise also, we are giving you some examples also. So, in order to make you understand that how you are going to identify it. So the next passage, which is given in a form of an example, and that is again, I'm going to read, and that is something which is on page number 14 itself. So it says that a person commits a crime because he is basically insecure, because he hated his stepmother at 9, because his sister needs a surgical operation. A policeman loots a store because his salary is too low. A city official accepts a bribe because he cannot resist to offer. Members of minority group, racial or otherwise, commit crimes because they can't get a job or are unaccepted by the people from the living around them. We find a truckload of excuses to absolve the individual from the responsibility of this action. So here, this is where they are saying, so this is a very general kind of an opinion where they are saying that why the common point, the general idea which is coming out from this passage is something where they are just giving you a kind of a multiple ideas. So multiple ideas is something where we can say that in the final one, they are saying that we find a kind of a truckload of excuses and to absolve the individual from a responsibility of this action. So if you just look towards this one, so examples are used in support of a general statement. Okay, so that means examples. So what they had done, the last line is something. So this is something which is talking about a kind of an inductive method of reasoning in an argument, because what they are doing, they are giving you a kind of an example. Number one example is something where they are talking about why a person commit a crime because he is insecure, or any kind of a psychological problem like he was hated by his stepmother, or because his sister needs a surgical operation. Then the second condition, they are saying that why the policeman loots a store because he doesn't have a proper kind of a salary. Then why the city officers are bribing because they cannot resist the offer to the members of the minority. So that is why bribing is there, why corruption is there. So the main agenda is all these things are taking about these things are talking about that people people have certain kind of an excuse instead of taking the responsibility of their own action. So that is argument is something which is being proceeding from a particular to the general. Okay, so this is how we can clarify between an inductive as well as a deductive kind of statement. Now, I will be coming to the next one. That is something which can be considered as the fallacies. So, what is a fallacy? So, sometimes what happens whenever, as I told you, that whenever we are making a kind of an argument, so suppose if we are making a kind of an argument, we should make sure that we should give a kind of a logical reasoning. We should make sure that whatever answers we are giving, it should have a kind of a rational approach. Now comes to the fallacy. So where we people are talking about the fallacy, so fallacy can be considered as a kind of a flaw in an argument. So where we people are talking about the flaws. So if we are using, that means if we are making it in a kind of a mode of a writing, so what all things we should avoid. Okay, so that is there. Whenever we are making a kind of a statement, the statement should be a very generalized form of a statement. It should not be very, very controversial. So that is how they are saying. So that is something which can be considered as a kind of a flaw. So flaw can be anything. It can be any kind of a hasty prediction, it can be any kind of an ideology, it can be stereotype, like you are it's making any kind of a statement, we are prejudiced with our own thought. So that is something which can be considered. So where we people are talking about, that means we should avoid these kind of the fallacies. We cannot be very straight about what we people are saying. We have to think before we are saying something. So we have to be very, very careful, and we have to avoid these kind of the false reasoning or these kind of the fallacies. So they have given the examples. These are different kind of the types of the fallacy. One is the hasty generalization. Hasty generalization is something where we make a kind of a statement without any kind of an evidence. So that is which can be considered as that whatever our statement is, it is not based on fact, but it is as a result based on as a kind of a biased, we are biased, or we had a kind of a limited experience. So, like, suppose we say this kind of a statement that everyone should learn Hindi. It is not mandatory, it's just a kind of a language. But We cannot, this kind of a statement is something which can be considered as uh, a kind of a hasty statement, or there is a kind of an example. I know Americans, they are all materialist. How can we say? We cannot make these kind of the statements. So these are something which can be generalization. In general, we are speaking for everyone. So that is something which is wrong. The next is there are certain kind of predictions also, that we know that this person is never going to work out. So that is something which can be considered. Or some people will say that if you allow women to work, then who will give birth to the children? Who will give birth to the kid? Okay. So finally, again, this is again a kind of a hasty prediction where people will say that, oh, that means people will just have the test tube babies. So there is no future. If you are talking about the equality of the women, if you are going to give them jobs, so they will not look towards the household activities. All these are something which are very biased. These are something which are not in a kind of a general form. That is there. There is another kind of a statement which can be considered as a stereotype. And stereotype is something which is being based, it is something which is based on a kind of an ideology. Ideology means that stereotyping means that some people make a kind of a very general kind of a statement that, um, oh, this is, oh, if there is an accident, people will look who is driving the car. And then definitely, oh, it's a woman. So women are bad drivers. Women do not have technical sense. So these are something which can be considered as a stereotypes, where we make very idealized kind of a statement where which is something where we try to discriminate something. So that is a stereotyping kind of a statement. Next is something which can be considered as a dogmatic statement. So dogmatic statement is something which does not appear as good as um it's not good, something like that, where the writer argues and his statements are something which we cannot change. Okay, like there are certain kind of the statements like where we people are saying like the kings. So the kings are someone who can do no wrong, or the kings are someone who are equivalent to the god, or the voice of king is something which is just like the god. So these are very dogmatic kind of a statement. Where can we say that a king can never go wrong? Yes, so many kings have made wrong decisions. So that is something where these kind of a statements are weird. These kind of a statement are something which are unacceptable. We should avoid these kind of statements. Next is something where we people can say that appeal to a kind of a questionable authority. So question means something where we are saying that when a writer argues to a case which is based on other person's opinion, so he thinks that the person whose authority cannot be questioned. So, for example, here what they have done, they had given a kind of an example that Shubhalakshmi cigarette smoking causes lung cancer. So, if she is smoking cigarette, that means definitely she will have a lung cancer. So, again, it puts a kind of a question mark. Okay, and that question mark is whether whether the cigarette is something which causes a kind of a lung cancer. Is it yes or no, or it can be anything else? Okay, so that is something which will again a kind of a statement which will lead further to the other question. So that is something which is which can be considered as a kind of a fallacy, this kind of a fallacy. Apart from that, there is another, that is non sequitur. That means the statement which doesn't follow from any kind of a fact which is being given. It doesn't have any proper thing. So that is, people are either skeptical. So that is something which we have seen. So that means for that they had given a kind of an example that if you have a kind of a long nose, you will get a good job. So that is again very improper kind of a statement. How can a person knows judge that whether he will get a kind of a good job or not? Nose doesn't mean that he will get a good job. Nose is not a kind of a license to provide you a kind of a good job. It is actually your educational qualification. So these are the fallacies. Okay, so I had given you a kind of the examples of these fallacies. Now, apart from that, there is another thing which can be considered as a non-rational ways of writing. So, where we people are talking about the non-rational ways of writing. So, non-rational ways of the writing is something which appeals to our emotion rather to the reason. So, that kind of a statement is something which can be considered as a non-rational way of writing, where emotion rather than reason. So it will definitely plays upon a feeling such as happiness, pity, moral, anger, fear, ambition, or a self-love or a boredom, etc. So that is where we have seen that where the writer has a kind of an intention to change the kind of a belief or a behavior of his own reader. Okay, so that is something which leads to any kind of an emotion. For that, I will give you an example. So that example is something which has already been given in your textbook, and that is on page number 16. So if you people are going to open the page number 16 in your textbook, I am going to read it. So what does it says? It says, it makes a kind of a statement. We weep for the true victim, the Black American. His wounds are deep, but along with their scars, Black people have a secret. Their genius is that they have survived. In the adaptation, they have developed a vigorous style of life. It touched religion, music, and a broad canvas of creativity. The psyche of a black man has been disturbed. For a white America to understand the life of a black man, it must recognize that so much time has passed and passed, so little has changed. So this is a kind of an example which is being given. So here, instead of giving a kind of a fact, this statement or this example or this passage arouse a kind of a feeling of pity, where definitely people will have a kind of a sympathy for the black people. So if we people are saying about, when we people are talking about America, so we have white people as well as the black people, and especially the writer is something which is catering to what the wounds of the black people, because the black Americans have survived, uh, and that is where they fought for their own rights, and where they are talking about that even though they bear a kind of a scar, they have a kind of a dark secret. So they have these kind of a secret, and that means that these people, the white people, will never understand that what their problem is. So the life of a so this is something which is being highlighted also, where they say that the life of a black man is it must recognize that so much time has passed and so little is changed. So somehow or in conclusion, he just wanted to say that even though we can say that America is a very developed kind of a country, but things are just like thing. Okay, so that is where we can say that whether after reading this kind of a statement, what kind of a feeling is being aroused? Is it a kind of a happiness or a kind of a pity or we get angry? Definitely, the proper answer after reading about this one is that definitely we will have a kind of a feeling for a pity. Pity means where we will sympathize with the mm, black people because this who is the sufferer? Here, the sufferer is the black man. So that is where these people are saying this kind of a statement. But this kind of a writing is something which can be considered as a non-rational way of life writing because it it's very it takes you towards a kind of an emotion. So that is there. There are certain kind of the words in the passage which arouse a feeling of pity. So where we people just look towards the kind of a passage. So what are those kind of a words? That words can be any kind of a word, like if we just look towards it, so we can see the scars that is there, which talks about mm, bringing a kind of a wounds. So these are the kind of the things which arouses a kind of like the scars. They evoke a sympathy. Okay, and then they had given this kind of an example where they are saying that what you can do, you can just further, you can make the sentences in your own form. So this is how in your exercise you can do it further. So the next non-rational way of a writing is something which can be considered as a satire or an irony. So where we people are talking about an irony, so irony can be considered as a use of a word which can be considered as which is clearly opposite to the one's meaning. Okay, so the meaning is very different. It is very opposite. So usually it is for amusing purpose. And when we people are talking about what is a satire, so satire is something which can be considered as a form of a writing that is intended to show a foolishness or a evil of some establishment or practice in an amusing way. So this is a very different form of a literary style. Excuse me. That is how the things are, but these things are being projected in a kind of an amused manner, in a kind of a fun type, but uh, they show things, but there is a kind of a difference between how things are and how actually they are being projected. And on the other hand, where we people are talking about the irony, which definitely reveals the opposite meaning. So we are just going to deal the kind of some kind of the examples which can be stated over here. Like here, if you just look towards uh, the examples which are being given in your book, so they had seen that since teacher works with the children all day, they need no children of their own, and hence and thus spared the expense of raising a family. See, this is a satire. So that means children, the teachers, they spend most of the time with the children, so they do not have the children of their own. So that is a kind of amusing way of unrational way. Or the other statement is something which is talking about teacher must spend their evening reading books and making papers so that they cannot watch TV. Have a kind of a fun time. So it is always being expected. That is what people think, that whenever we are talking about a teacher, the maximum time what the teacher will do. Teacher will spend their time only on a reading, on making notes, and they will be just spending their time on working, and that's all. So that is something which is being mentioned. Seen it. So these are some of the examples. And now we will be talking about another unit, and that unit is something which can be considered as the note taking. So, note taking is something which is very, very important. And in this note taking, we will be talking about what are the things which are important in the note taking. So, let us discuss this in a brief manner. So, where we people are talking about the note taking. So, what this note taking is all about? Just give me 1 minute. Yes. So now we are coming towards the note taking only. So in this, what we are going to do when we people are working. So there are different ways of organizing a kind of a note. So whenever we are making a note, so how do we make notes? Okay, so just imagine two pictures. So one picture is people, like the students who are sitting inside a kind of a classroom, and there they are listening a kind of a lecture, and out of that lecture they are making notes. One example. Another example is something where we can identify it in a form of a different kind of a picture where you people are self-studying, and after your self-studying, what you are doing, you are trying to memorize everything, and then you are making your own notes. So one is your self-pattern, and the other one is something which can be considered as your another pattern. That is, one is through listening and another one is through writing. So in this, what we people are going to discuss here, we are going to talk about that what is actually what is this note taking all about? How do we make notes? And um, what are the different kind of the ways of note taking, what are the different techniques of the note taking, as well as we will be talking about that how in form of the tables or how in form of the note, how in form of the diagrams we can make notes. So there are it is something which will be covering your unit number 5 also and unit number 4 also. A little bit is something which is being given everywhere in your block number 2 as well as your block number 3. So they had given different kind of the examples. So we will be talking about the note taking. So here, whenever we are saying that what note taking is, so note taking is something which can be considered as a very important study skill. A very, it can be considered as a short written record of a facts to aid the memory, to emphasize on the memory. That is why when I started my lecture, I gave you the two examples. On one hand, we have the example of you sitting inside a classroom where all the students are trying to make notes. That is the one situation, situation number one. Situation number two is where the students are preparing for the exams and then they are making their own notes. So that is there. These are two diverse situations where we make notes. One is through the listening, and second one is through our own reading. So that is a short written record of the fact to aid the memory, because whenever a lecture is being delivered in front of us, so what we do, we highlight it, we write certain kind of the sentence in order to memorize it, that this is what these are the points which we people have jotted down, and now we are going to express ourselves accordingly. So that is something which is one process of the note taking. So here, uh, another why we take a note is it keeps a lot of information at our disposal for ready for the reference. Because if we have jotted down the points, then what we can do, we can elaborate those points, we can have a kind of an extensive reading of those notes. Then the another point or the another fact which it talks about is that it helps to reconstruct that what was said or written, and thus it accelerates the process of remembering. So it can be used for the acceleration of our own memory. So that is why it is important to make certain kind of the notes, and that is why we make notes. Apart from that, we are going towards the next statement also. That means wherever we are making a kind of a report, so it is useful for preparing a kind of a report, or it is something which is important for delivering a kind of a speech or participating in any kind of a debate discussion. Note taking is something which becomes very important when we are writing an essay or taking a kind of an interview, or we are revising our lesson. So that is something how we make the note, and we use to summarize it in a form of a text. So that is something which is being required, which are the things which is important in a form of a note taking. Okay, so here, how do we organize a notes? So whenever we are making a kind of a note, so that is what we people till now, this is how we people will be using. In this, we are going to discuss that how we people are going to organize a notes in the form of the tables and the diagrams. So there are different methodologies of making the notes. So wherever we are using this kind of a line, so that is, we often take notes from the passage which contains a kind of a figure, contrast, that is difference between the two things or the person. So that is something which has a different kind of an aspect of a single topic. So sometimes what happens, there is a kind of an information, and that information is something that is based on a kind of a study, and that study is something which is based on a kind of a table. That study is something which gives a kind of an information in a form of a figure. For example, for that I can just give you an example of just take an example of a school. So suppose where we are saying that in a school, and that school is up to class 12. Okay. So now what we have to do, we have to take the note with, that means each class. That means class, we have to summarize, or we have to make a note of how many students are there from class 1 to class 12. Okay, so if we have to diversify our points in form of the table, so how we are going to diversify, how we are going to categorize? First of all, class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, class 5, class 6, class 7. Each class will be segregated into different sections. Okay, and those sections can be section A, B, C, D. So how the number of students are being spread over those kind of the classes, like in section class 1 we have 5 sections, and each 5 sections have 40 number of students. So this is how in a form of a tabulated form, in a form of a table, we make a kind of a note. Then class 2, how many section it is being divided? What are the names of the section? How many students? Similarly, going further. Then what happens when we go to the senior classes? The senior classes, the sections are being divided in the form of their, most probably, whether they are the students of art, whether they are the students of sciences, whether they are the students of the commerce. This is how we define it. So this is how we organize our notes. In your textbook, they had given a kind of an example, and that example is something which is talking about a kind of an information in a form of a figure, and that is something which has been given in page number 24. I'm just going to talk about it. So in this, they are talking about edible oil is an important constituent of Indian diet. Besides being source of energy, they add a special flavor to our food and provide a lubricating action to the body tissues. In recent years, their association with different human diseases and their adulteration have become a health problem for people. A variety of a cooking oil are commonly used in different parts of the country. The major sources are groundnut oil, mustard oil, sesame, and coconut oil. So if you will just look to what they are used, they are talking about that this is how the major source of the oil is. Either they will be talking about the groundnut oil, how much tons of groundnut oil is being used, mustard oil, how much tons, how much tons of the coconut oil. Again, they are talking about the sunflower oil. So they had categorized it, soya bean oil. So different categories of the oil. So they had given it in a form of the number. Then they are categorizing it that these kind of the oils like the groundnut and the sesame oils are common in the west coast of the central in India. Coconut oil is something which is there in the south. Mustard oil is there, which is very common in Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, and the east, and the Kashmir in the north. So that is where they are talking about that the annual per capita consumption of the edible oil in a country is about 6 kg in 1984, which is lower than the world average of 11 kg, than the average of 26 kg in the developed country. And it is higher in a high socio-economic status group due to their used fried preparation. It is, however, desirable that daily intake of the fat should not contribute more than 15 to 20% of calories in the diet. So, as I gave you the first example, I gave you the example of the classroom that if we have to make a kind of a table, so how we are going to categorize it. Now, what they had done, they in this passage, if you just look towards the passage, they are talking about the different kinds of the oil. Then they are talking about the consumption of the oil. Then they are talking about the health issues, health problems which develops from the oil. And the third is something where they are talking about the consumption of oil in India per capita. And then they are comparing it with the other countries. Okay, so this is how, with a kind of a relevant fact, there is given a kind of a description, a kind of a composition, and in that composition, you have to work on the fact. So that is there. Okay, and there they have given a kind of an example also. So this is how you need to practice it at home, and once you will practice, then only you are going to learn it. Apart from that, there is another kind of an exercise which is being given, and that exercise is something which is talking about uh, the diagrams. So sometimes where we people are talking about the diagram. So the diagrams are something which will give you a kind of a general idea, and through that general idea, you have to formulate a note. on that one only. So that is something which is being given in your notebook. So if we just look towards the another kind of an example, and that is something which is saying about page number 25. So the passage which is being given in a form of a contrastive description. So again, what it is talking about, it is dealing with another kind of a fact, and that is something. There are two main kinds of the grassland, are the tropical grassland and the temperate grassland. Apart from that, I would definitely like to give you the example from the diagram. Okay, so the diagram which is being given in your textbook is how you are going to organize your notes in the form of a diagram. So that is when an information is something which is being given in a form of a paragraph. So it can be presented visually, and how it can be presented in a form of a drawing or in a form of a flow chart. Like the current example is this one only. That means the PPT, through charts, through the flow chart. What we do, we just take out a kind of a notes, and what we do, we explain those kind of things in a proper term. So that is how we people discuss all these kind of the thing. So that is where it is being mentioned. That means how we are going to organize the notes in a form of a diagram. So this is very, excuse me. So this is something either through a form of a diagram, or through a form of a flow chart, or in a form of a tree diagram. Things are something which can be explained. So diagram, whenever we are using a kind of a diagram, it should always present a kind of a mental picture of what you have understood in a paragraph. Like basically we use it in the science, and that is how we explain it in a form of a flow chart. So that is how we explain that topic with the use of a diagram. Like they had given a kind of an example on page number 29, and that I'm going to read in front of you. And in page number 29, these people are talking about one thing, and that is photosynthesis is the process by which the chlorophyll containing organisms, green plant and algae, capture energy in the form of a light and convert it into a chemical energy. Almost all the energy is available for the life in Earth biosphere. The zone in which the life can exist is made available through photosynthesis. In the first stage of photosynthesis, chlorophyll absorbs sunlight. Chlorophyll is a green substance in the leaf which is able to trap the energy of the sunlight and use it in a process of making carbohydrates. Within the leaf, there is a small amount of water. The energy, which is chlorophyll, is trapped in the sun, is used to split the water in the leaf into hydrogen and oxygen. Most of the oxygen is released to the air. The second stage of chlorophyll uses the energy absorbed from the sunlight to combine the hydrogen, which is obtained by spitting the water with carbon dioxide, which the leaf obtained from the air. Then several complicated changes, the hydrogen and the carbon dioxide are combined in such a way that a carbohydrate is produced. The carbohydrate is called glucose. Later, using glucose as the most important building material, the plant can make substances like amino acids and proteins. These chemicals are needed for the growth of both plant and animals. Something else happens during photosynthesis that is of the greatest importance to us. A constant way of supply of oxygen is released into the air by the plant, and at the same time, carbon dioxide, which would poison us if we breathed it too much of it, nearly all used up. So this is a very basic kind of an example where they are trying to explain what is the process of photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is something which can be considered as a process of making food which happens in front of the sunlight. And since all the plants are green in color, and what happens, they had a kind of the element, and that is chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is something which can be considered as an agent. They absorb the energy from the sunlight, and finally they uses that energy in order to make food. And that is, plants release oxygen and they take carbon dioxide. And this is something which is being stored. So this is how they are talking about that, how the earth biosphere is something which is being maintained. So this example clearly shows the different stages of the photosynthesis. The first one is how the sunlight causes the chlorophyll to turn into the carbohydrate, then uh, to split the water, and then how it absorbs the energy. And what we can do, we can make it in a form of a flow chart, because the passage has been given, and the task of a student is to utilize, to make notes, breaking the paragraph into a kind of a chart, or either in a form of a diagram, and then explaining each and every fact accordingly. So this is the process how we use diagram to explain our fact. So this is the process of the note taking. So that is either through the form of the tables or through the form of the diagrams. We make notes. So this is all about, this is what I'm going to discuss today. So now I'm coming towards my final conclusion. So in my next lecture, we will be talking about the reports. I will be continuing this note taking further also, because this is not something which is being limited to the tables or the diagram. But apart from that, whenever we people are talking about the process of the note taking, what is there in the note taking, so you will find it further. That means there are other things also which can be considered as an important form of mentioning it in a that means how we people make a kind of a note in a proper form. That means we can write notes in the form of a summary, we can summarize things, and then finally we can explain it. There is one more thing which I think I might have left out, that is a descriptive kind of a composition. So, where we people are talking about a descriptive kind of a composition, so descriptive form of a composition is there where it can be anything. That means how we describe things. So describing things can be in any kind of a form, where we can describe a person, where we can describe a place. So that is image is being given. That image we have to explain or describe. So that is how we use it in a form of a writing. So I think I have taken my time. So now I am giving you time for the question and answer. I'm stopping now. I will stop sharing my screen. Were you able to hear my lecture?
Yes.
Okay. So is there any question which you have to ask now, since I had stopped my screen sharing? Is there any question which anyone have to ask? Okay. So it's please share if it is possible to share it in the Slack. Okay. Yes. So is there any question? No question. Okay. So okay. So we are just going to wind up the lecture. Just give me 1 minute. So I hope you have understood the concept. So today what we people have done, we people have already gone through certain kind of the things, and that is where we are talking about the note taking. We people have talked about uh, the kind of the compositions, what are the inductive method, what are the deductive method, using all the example. So that will be all for today. Uh, so is there any question from anyone's side? And thank you for volunteering and admitting all the students in this session. Okay, thank you so much for all these kind of listening me patiently. And you are not having any question. What we have done, we have simultaneously discussed the examples which are being given in your book. So I was referring your textbook also. So if you want to follow it up, you can follow it. And in the meanwhile, um, if you have any queries, you can ask it. So I will be meeting you in my next session. That will be next week. Okay, so now you have no questions. So whenever the students are not having any question, it is being understood that I uh, either you have understood everything or you haven't understood anything. So it leads to a dilemma. Yes, ma'am, we have understood. No, ma'am, we haven't understood anything. Again, big silence. Okay, then we can just stop the recording.
हाँ सर, रिकॉर्डिंग चल रही है अभी। ठीक है सर।